This guy sold his startup for $975 million. But in his own words, I'm not that optimistic about my life. Imagine being 32, you spent 10 years building a startup at breakneck speed, and now you can literally buy whatever you want and go wherever you want, including climbing the Himalayas. And not only that, you're celebrated across Silicon Valley as an icon. That's Vinay Hiramath, one of the co-founders of the popular app Loom, who's reportedly worth $45 million after the sale of the company. But in a recent viral blog post, he confessed, "I'm rich, but I have no idea what to do with my life." Jim Carrey said something familiar. "I wish everyone could get rich and famous and have everything they ever dreamed of so that they can see that that's not the answer." In this episode, we'll look at how you can have an identity earthquake even when things go really well, how doing hard things isn't necessarily always the answer, and how even finding a mission might not bring life satisfaction. So let's start with the definition of post-financial and post-achievement. So again, post-financial is easy. It's you no longer need to work, right? I actually define post-financial slightly differently than like total financial independence. To me, it's you can take 5 years off, right? To me, you're post-financial if you can take 5 years off and live the same quality of life. So that's post-financial, financial freedom. Post-achievement is a bit different. Now, post-achievement means you have shot the lights out in your career in terms of achievement. You've achieved more at your young age. Oftentimes it's kids of immigrants, middle-class kids that never in a million years thought they would be bankers, founders, lawyers, law partners, and so on. But the thing about post, so you've achieved a lot. And again, this is all personal and relative, but you get to this realization that no additional achievement is going to change your baseline happiness. I want to repeat that for emphasis. Post-achievement is when you've achieved a bunch of things. Oftentimes they're professional, usually they're professional. And you say to yourself, okay, you're a managing director at Goldman Sachs. And like, wow, that's a feat. It takes a lot of hard work to get there. But then you say, okay, now I could be on some committee or I can move up into the C-suite. But deep inside, your heart and soul knows that that's not going to change your happiness. That's when you're a post-achievement. And I've said this in other episodes. I'm writing a book. And if you said, "Okay, I'm going to push a button and that book's going to sell 5 million copies," I'd say, cool. That's awesome. A lot of great things will happen. But that's not going to change the way I really feel about myself, how I feel about life. So it's kind of when the marginal utility of the next achievement is close to zero. External achievement. Now there's different internal achievements, spiritual, family, and so on. Here it's external achievement. So our friend Vinay, the co-founder of Loom, is post-achievement and post-financial. And he writes in this post, "Everything feels like a side quest, but not in an inspiring way. I don't have the same base desires driving me to make money or gain status. I have infinite freedom, yet I don't know what to do with it. And honestly, I'm not the most optimistic about life." So here's what happens. Vinay ends up walking away from a lot of money. So I'm reading between the lines here, and some of this is triangulation based on some internet sleuthing. But he makes $45 million. And then it looks like he has an earn-out to stay, where he has to stay for probably a couple more years. And for that, he'll get another $60 million. And he has this kind of hard decision as to whether he should stay and try to collect that extra 60 million. Funny enough, here's what he says about why he won't stay in corporate. Because then they got acquired by Atlassian, which makes Trello and other productivity software. He says, "Staying at the acquiring company was not it for me for the big company reasons you might suspect. Lots of politics, things move slowly, NPC coworkers," that line made me laugh. "But I found it hard to give up a $60 million pay package. I'd already made more money than I knew what to do with, but your mind does funny things when you start to consider numbers like this." Now, this is a situation that I often see with peers, usually in financial services, entrepreneurs, And so the numbers are usually slightly different, but I'll give you an example. Now, it's a modified example, but the spirit of the example is the same. So this is a private equity guy, my age, 46. And he had pocketed after tax, he had $50 million of net worth. Now he had the golden handcuffs. Every year he could stay, it was somewhere between $5 and $15 million. But the job is soul sucking. His kids are getting older. He hasn't exercised in 25 years. Marriage, meh. So let's look at the math. 50 million, let's just take the low end. Now he could stay, every year he stays, he guarantees 5 million. So that's 10% of your net worth. But he's miserable and he's getting older. Most of the time, people in that position I have seen, they stay. It's just until the numbers are so large, and rightfully so, right? $5 million is a fuck ton of money. But relative to what he has and relative to what he spends, it's not. And on top of that, many of these folks I talk to, they don't even want to leave they're not playing for generational wealth. They're like, yeah, I want to support my kids' college and maybe help them buy a house, but like, I don't want to raise trust fund kids. And side note, a lot of the times these people don't have like massive philanthropic aims. Now, is that a problem? Probably. Maybe I'll tackle that in a different video. And I'll rewind this back to, in my case, I had saved like 4.3 million. I was 35, so similar age as Vinay. And my golden handcuffs, this was slightly different. They were in deferred stock. So you always leave some deferred. It was $1 million in deferred, 900,000 in deferred. So about 25% of my net worth. And the opportunity cost of the future salary was somewhere between $1 and $2.5 million. Right? So again, proportionally, it was actually more painful. But anyway, Vinay goes to the Redwoods, classic Silicon Valley, and the Redwoods talk back and they say, you should leave. Okay. So he leaves, he walks away from the earnout. He's completely free with, again, we're assuming $45 million in the bank. He gets into his next phase. And again, you can see the achiever mindset here, where he tries to be Elon. Hey, quick time out. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who thinks deeply and intentionally about your career, about your life, and about your relationships. But sometimes you might find yourself in a place feeling stuck, unmotivated, or just rudderless. If that's you, we have a coaching program for people looking to make a bold pivot and rediscover their aliveness. Just check out radreads.co/coaching. Now back to the video. So he tries to be Elon. So the immediate 2 weeks after leaving an intense 10-year journey of building Loom, I did what any healthy person does and met with over 70 investors and founders in robotics. I had been learning about robotics for quite some time and was positive I wanted to throw myself into giving computers arms and legs. I had come up with all the taglines to delude myself into thinking that this was his quote unquote life's calling. Everything that had happened had been leading to this exact point, right? So this is the phase where he tries to be Elon, right? And he just throws himself into the next challenge, right? Again, this is the thing with post-achievement folks is you're almost addicted to the feeling of achievement. And we'll talk about this. Is it the accolades? Is it the status? Is it the money? Clearly, it's not the money and the status in Vinay's case. And I can relate. My friends joke with me is like, you turn everything into a challenge. You say you're not going to drink, you don't drink for a year. You say you want to learn how to surf, you surf every day for 5 straight years. You say you want to learn how to deadlift, you immediately try to get to 300 pounds of deadlifting. I've done it with RadReads. I've done it with my writing. I've done it with my coaching. I've done it with my productivity course. I've done it with learning music. And I've done it now. I'm like trying to learn how to code using AI. And I guess the thing I can say the most is that it's to me, now I'm not speaking for Vinay, I'll try to distinguish that. It's a lot like alcohol, right? Just like you need bigger hits to keep that euphoric feeling, again, of just feeling good about accomplishing things. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't go out and try to achieve things and pursue excellence. But in this case, like Vinay knows, and I've personally experienced this, like there's an emptiness that comes with that, right? And that's kind of the canary in the coal mine, is what is that emptiness? Okay, so back to Vinay's story. He realized that that's not the path he wants to go down. And so he then decides to travel. He does a ton of traveling. He doesn't exactly say where. And this reminds me of my friend Lawrence Yeo, or more to that, his post, Travel is No Cure for the Mind, where he basically says, travel's awesome. It comes with temporary novelty and excitement. It's a change of scenery. It comes with relaxation. But I tell you, many people that have quit high-paying jobs and then travel, the travel kind of becomes its own burden, right? You're constantly moving around. You're not you don't have your stuff. You don't have a community. You're always like eating out, right? I mean, as banal as that sounds, like it's not that fun to eat out every night. And but more importantly, the point that Lawrence tries to make, and Vinay doesn't directly address this in his post, is that if you're running from mental discontent or ennui or agitation or low self-worth, basically an inner problem, travel cannot fix your inner problems. It can fix your outer problems, like it can make you smile more. It can get you like a taste of novelty and change and perspective. But to expect travel to change your inner world is a bit deceptive, right? And Lawrence writes, cultivating gratitude and curiosity within the solution, he says, is cultivating gratitude and curiosity within one's daily life rather than seeking fulfillment through external changes like travel. And in Vinay's story, he says he ends up breaking up with his girlfriend who loved him unconditionally. He actually says in the post, if you're reading this, I'm sorry you didn't do anything. It was all internal. And then there's a reminiscence of nostalgia of, man, the early days of building a company were fun, right? There's kind of a yearning for the past. And he writes, I've only started to realize that when Loom was in its early innings, I felt very secure with my position in life. And lots of this stemmed from an extreme gratitude for the journey that I was on. I'm going to repeat that, an extreme gratitude for the journey I was on. I was happy with everything as it was. The growth trajectory of the company was more than I could ever dream for. I was happy. I felt secure. It could all turn to shit the next day and that would be okay, right? But keep in mind, he's talking about the early days of Loom, not the days when he made, when the company sold for $975 million. And this actually reminds me, I speak to and I coach, and a lot of entrepreneurs are listening to this podcast with something that happens with exited founders. Again, they hit that post-achievement, post-financial point. They usually get really sad right after the sale. And then what they want to recreate is exactly that moment that he was describing. They always talk about the early days, how special they were, how invested they were. And in those early days, but the early days suck. You're literally eating ramen. You're working 18-hour days. The stress is through the roof. So there's this duality, right? There's this tension. And here's the thing about this tension. Vinay doesn't say this, but I'll say the tension is that you can't have one without the other, right? And so what happens with these exited entrepreneurs, they become investors, they become VCs, they join or start what's called the venture studios. They basically try to do the easy part of entrepreneurship, but without the hard part, the struggle, the long hours, but they want the same reward. And again, it's not a financial reward. It's that feeling of satisfaction, right? So it's interesting to see that again. He then talks about how the goalposts move And then there's like a series of identity shifts. He says, as Loom continued to skyrocket to new highs, I started to have growing expectations for myself, and others started to have growing expectations of me. When we went through our first round of layoffs, this company my ego was hitched to had suffered a massive blow, so I lost myself. The whole chapter of Loom created a complex web of internalized insecurities I must now work hard to disentangle and free myself from, right? So you see the goalposts move, but also the identity of like, this hurts, this self-esteem, this next chapter. Who am I once I'm out of this chapter? He's out of this chapter of Loom is over for Vinay. So where does he go next? He goes to his do hard things phase, where he climbs a 6,800 peak in the Himalayas, foot peak in the Himalayas with no mountaineering experience. Right? This is the folks that do Ironman. They like retire and they do Ironman. This is my version of surfing, less intense, but I surfed like 1,700 days since I moved to California. It's intense, right? And I share a lot of these feelings, obviously with way less money and way less external success, as Vinay does. And he actually gets altitude sickness and chronic bronchitis and hyponics, I think, which I don't even know what that is. But basically, with no experience, he does something insanely difficult and dangerous. And he makes it through. And as he makes it through, he gets another clue about himself, about doing hard things. It is the heartbeat of my life. And I don't 100% understand why, but it probably has something to do with me having not the best childhood. So not the best childhood comes with this feeling of doing hard things, right? And again, I'm not going to diagnose. I'm not in a position to diagnose, but we'll talk a little bit about internal family systems. Like there's definitely like a pattern here. Then he joins the tech bro circuit, and this is just, I find this funny, amusing. He joins Doge. That's Elon Musk's and Vivek Ramaswamy's Department of Government Efficiency. It's not officially part of the government, but it's there to eliminate government waste. And so obviously it's a lot of tech people there. He gets connected. He does a bunch of interviews, and it's funny. He calls the people interviewing him autistic, but then he crosses that out and he says smart. So he's ironically making that statement. And so here's his experience joining Doge. The next 4 weeks of my life consisted of hundreds of calls recruiting the smartest people I've ever talked to, working on various projects I'm definitely not able to talk about, and learning how completely dysfunctional the government was. It was a blast. So then that leads to what he calls an undeniable mission, right? And I guess he had it with robotics. And in that mission, he says, I learned about the power of urgency and having an undeniable mission. Not by reading it somewhere, by experiencing it. I came to realize how laughable my robotic stint had been in comparison. And I started to realize that although the mission of Doge is extremely important, it wasn't the most important thing I needed to focus on with urgency for myself. I needed to go back into ambiguity, focus on my insecurities, and be okay with that for a while. Doge wasn't going to fix that. So after 4 intoxicating weeks, he calls off his plans to move to DC and quits Doge. I love the phrase that he said, I need to get back to the ambiguity. And I call this phase the wilderness, right? And so people that leave these high status, high earning jobs, the phase 1 is this just elation, like, oh, I can breathe. I don't have to check markets. I don't have to check email. I don't have to set an alarm. I don't have to wear a suit. And that feels amazing. In the second phase, this ambiguity phase, is this I call it the wilderness, where all these questions of identity, how people see you, how you see yourself, things really quiet down. Like no one really cares about you anymore once you leave that, unless you try and put in effort. And then these, in that space, this anxiety and this angst comes up. So this is what he what I call the wilderness. And if you break through the wilderness, I think I probably personally broke through the wilderness around year 8, which was when my entrepreneurial visions came crashing down, when the Supercharge Your Productivity course tanked after COVID. And it was the lowest I had ever felt in my entrepreneurial journey. And that was the most ambiguous. And I guess it was 2 years. I'm still in it. That was 2 years ago. That was a real period. That was when I kind of broke through, but it was hard. And I feel like I'm on the other side of that. So Vinay calls off his plan to move to DC. He ditches Doge, and he moves to Hawaii to study physics. He wants to build up his first principles foundation. Again, just you could see this like probably like Enneagram 3 deep thinker, because he wants to start a company that manufactures real world things. It seems plausible, but I'm learning to just accept that I'm happy learning physics. That's the goal in and of itself. If it leads to nothing, that's okay. If it means I'll never do something as spectacular as Loom, so be it. It's been too long since I've been completely raw and real with myself. And here's an interesting thing. I think that hyper-driven folks, there's this concept from the philosopher Kiran Setia that's drawn from the Greek philosophers of telic and atelic activities. So telic activities are activities that are a means to an end, right? Like you work out to look a certain way and live longer. You read a textbook to develop another skill so that you can make more money. You learn how to dress better so that you could, like, people will comment on how you look, things like that. Atelic activities is when the joy comes from the activity itself. That's when you might making dinner is ambiguous. Listening to music, hiking, going on a walk, talking with friends, calling a friend. Right? There's no goal. And again, you could say like happiness is a goal, but let's put that aside. So hyper-driven people they do this thing where they take any activity that should be enjoyable for its own sake. I'll take this example for me, learning how to make music. I suck and it's enjoyable, but there's a part of me that wants to tell people that I'm talented at it and I'm going to work really hard. But again, there's a subtle distinction here. Am I working very hard at it for the feeling of my own craft? Or am I working very hard at it so that other people will be like, whoa, Khe's really good at making music, right? And I wrestle with that tension. So that's telic and atelic. I encourage you to think about that. And so with that, Vinay leaves some lingering questions. Number one, why couldn't I just leave Loom and say, I just don't know what to do next, right? That's the wilderness question. Number two, why do I feel the need to only be on a journey if it's grand, right? Why do I have to be excellent at everything? That's me paraphrasing. Or really powerful question. Why do I fear being ordinary? I feel this. Why do I feel being ordinary? Will people would my kids love me less if I was ordinary? No, but I'm so scared of being ordinary. What does ordinary even mean? If you lined up every person in the world and rank them by some metric of success, I'm ordinary, right? So it's an interesting one, very relatable. What is wrong with being insignificant? Okay, that's his third question. And why is letting people down so hard? And I'm going to come back to this question. So that's the end of Vinay's blog post. I'll share a few thoughts on it. The first comment that came up, this post went viral. And it was viewed by millions and millions of people. Pretty much the biggest one was, go have kids. And as he says, he's single as of writing that post. Go have kids. And I get it. Like kids, in some ways it stops being about you. Right? And you have to sacrifice, and you recognize a lot of it is out of control or out of your control. And at the same time, I think kids is a little bit like travel. Like it's not first of all, having kids is extremely demanding in its own way. Beautifully demanding, if you ask me, but fucking demanding. But more importantly, having kids, it's like not a button that makes these clearly, and he's the first to admit it, and I admit it myself, like all of my challenges are internal. It's how I see myself. It's how I talk to myself. It's the fears I have, it's the insecurities I have. Having a kid does not make those go away. If anything, having a kid, like you see these parents that are projecting their insecurities on their kids. Oh, fuck, man. Right there, what's the Young quote? The hardest, the biggest challenge for a child is the unrealized dream of their parents. Fuck, man. I'm paraphrasing, but fuck, that's wild. My friend Joe Hudson, who is a frequent podcast guest and just an amazing spiritual teacher, he says in this case, he commented on it. He says people do not want to work the same way they used to because it was exhausting and it hurt their souls, right? We've talked about tired souls, yet their mind keeps telling them they need to be productive and do something big. So there's this disconnect between the soul and the mind. Like, how do you heal that? I personally believe that you need a lens of spirituality. As I go back to Vinay's 4 questions, he said, why couldn't I just leave and say, I don't know what to do next? Why do I feel the need to be on a journey if it's grand? What is wrong with being insignificant? And why is letting people down so hard? I would say, and again, this I can relate to these questions, so I'm speaking on my behalf. Significance, special, being seen, being perceived by others. It's all about validation. And validation ultimately is about love, not romantic love, but feeling loved. Right? So as you go down these questions, like at the end of the day, it's like, do people love me? Do I love myself? And here's where like the immigrant story comes out is, a lot of immigrants and children of immigrants feel that it's not true, but they feel that love is conditional. They're conditionally loved. They're conditionally accepted. It's the classic, get good grades, parents show you love, get bad grades, parents are like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Right? And that conditioning, and that's just one element of it, but that basically is the same as telling yourself, I will only love you, like love myself, if I do things that are great. And God forbid I do things that are not great. No one who will love me will I love myself, right? And I'll close with one last point, where there's a phrase in the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism, which says desire is suffering. And you can look in here and in my own stories, like the desire to be seen as special, the desire to achieve hard things. Those are all desires, right? And desire is suffering. It's like it's the fact that you desire those that makes you unhappy. And again, it's not that you desire to do hard things. It's that you desire the feeling that comes with doing hard things, right? And again, it's like an attachment to this outcome, right? And if you truly can let go of the outcome and that's the thing he's wrestling with the physics. He's like, I need physics to be foundational for my next company. What if I just love physics, right? What if I just love physics? If you want to continue to explore this thinking, there's another video that really captures this perspective on me leaving Wall Street. Take care.